Okay, the magic timer has started. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rob. I lead the Microsoft Threat Protection Product and Engineering team. And I am excited to talk about where we're going with agents, Agentic SOC, how that changes the game for defenders, and to spend some time with Allie Mellen up on stage. This is my first time presenting in a silent theater kind of arrangement. I think the goal is for us to make sure we make a lot of noise to disrupt the other people in the other rooms. Yay! Wow, crowd pandering works. Okay, good. Excellent. Okay, this is who we'll be talking to today. Again, I'm Rob. Allie Mellon will be coming up, and we'll have Corina come and demo some of the real things that we've actually got working to show you how this system functions in reality. And the important thing is, are agents actually improving outcomes today? Does that create a foundation we can build on for the future? There's been a ton of hype and excitement, and now's the time for us to start to figure out what's real and what's not. So here's some lessons that we've actually got from using agents in the real world. First, we are actively using agents inside of our own Defender experts' flow of work on how the agents triage and manage alerts and manage communication, and it is having a dramatic impact on humans and AI working together being 72% faster. So that's real. We've done real experimental data with customers using our phishing triage agent, and we see not only do they identify more accurate phish and do it faster, but the thing is that they do it better. And that's one of the consistent themes that we see. If you remove toil, if you remove grunt work, you actually help the analysts do a better job. And it speeds things up. It delivers real value. I think we're at the start of a journey, and I'm excited to see where that journey goes, because I think the use of AI and agents is one of those critical things that can change the game, level the playing field with attackers. But one thing I want everyone to make sure to keep in mind is it's not just about tier 1 agents triaging alerts, going through their queue. This will change how defenders work across all levels of the security team. From those frontline analysts, through the escalation experts, up to the specialists and threat hunters. It turns people from doing everything manually by hand into, I have tools and agents to help me, and now the defenders are empowered to outpace the attackers and search for those real strategic business outcomes. Which leads to our mission. After spending time with security teams and CISOs around the globe, it's clear our mission: deliver adaptive, autonomous defense, freeing defenders for strategic, high-impact work. And this is one of the things that really resonates for me, is that we can have a system that actually makes the defenders better and empowers them to spend their time on the new things that matter, not just constantly toiling through the same tasks over and over again. In order to do that, we have to rethink how we build and deliver technology. We have to deliver a platform that enables greater access to information. One of the reasons that I'm so excited about what AI and agents can do is because it's essentially a big data game. And this is a place where the defensive team is structurally advantaged. We have more data, and we should be able to use that and have access to all of it to have bigger impact. That starts with the platform, and that is why we built Sentinel Data Lake as a place where organizations of all sizes can afford to keep a huge amount of data and then leverage it through graph APIs that make that available in ways that are more accessible to agents and AI, through vector database and RAG implementations, and up through an MCP server to talk directly to agents. Defender is built on top of that and delivers the operational insights and tools that allow the defensive team to be effective. And what that does is it changes how you think about security. And we've talked a lot about graphs, but I just want to drive the point home. This is the classic Same old sad story of an attacker breaking into an organization. And unfortunately, in this example and so many real-world examples, they did it with a phishing email, they did social engineering at the start of the attack, and they moved laterally through a variety of domains. Frequently, we'll see them moving back and forth between cloud and on-prem. In this case, they went up to AWS. And that's why I'm so excited to talk about how we actually provide autonomous defense and disruption, protecting assets that live inside AWS, and why we've expanded Sentinel to be able to deliver these kinds of capabilities. What we're thinking about is how do we make sure that the entire organization is protected, regardless of where the attack is coming in from. We'll actually show you this in a demo, but there's a few things that I wanted to drive home before we do that. First, if we have this map of the estate, and we understand where attackers are going, and we can automatically contain them using disruption that blocks the attack inside of AWS and across the environment, we can now move the ball forward and actually start to predict where is that attacker going to do next? Because we have all of the available attack paths, and we know where the vulnerable spots are, and we saw the attacker, so we can go into a shields up mode for all of the environment around that breach and actually prevent them from being able to move laterally into other places. This is the holy grail of how a defensive team needs to respond to an ongoing attack. Make sure they don't leak to anywhere else. And this is how we can really drive home and help with that, because this is what attackers are all about, is pivoting from place to place. So when we have these autonomous defensive mechanisms, we reduce exposure. But the important thing, the thing that I'm excited about, is that we're actually delivering bandwidth for the security team. We're helping them be able to do more, and we're helping them be able to do it better. So let's talk about what that actually means in practice. Getting back to triage, it's a flood of alerts for security teams of organizations of all sizes. Most of the largest organizations have given up on being able to review all of those alerts. And here we see some real-world data. This isn't just Defender. This is about going to talk to a broad range of customers, including the custom alerts that they have in their SOC. We found that 46% of the alerts that we were reviewing were false positives. One way to think about that is security professionals spending time chasing down things that don't matter. That's the coldest, harshest way to think about it. Another data point, 41% of the things showing up in the SOC, even after automated triage, just don't go investigated. They don't have time. One of the things breaks my heart the most is I go talk to security teams about how do they do a breach investigation, when are they done? They're done when they've run out of time. They're done when they need to move on and get to the next thing. Let's help them with that problem. So, introducing an agent to help triage the queue. This starts with the phishing triage agent, and Corina will show us this live. I think we actually, hopefully folks got a chance to see it in the keynote. It goes ahead and it pulls things out of the queue so the analyst doesn't have to spend the time on those things that aren't going to matter. But now let's flip to the other side. Okay, if you're helping me ignore the noise, how are you going to help me find the things I didn't see? And so an agent to actually expose undetected threats. Think of it as the sleepless hunter that will go looking, oh, there was a breach, there was a problem, now I need to go deep and make sure that that pivot didn't happen, that there wasn't a leak, that the attacker didn't escape containment, that I know everywhere that they went. Now, one of the most important things as we go into this demo, which I'm incredibly excited about, everything we're showing here is real. Just like I talked about earlier, we're using agents inside Defender Experts. We have these things deployed in the real world. And what we're showing you is what these things can actually do in reality. With that, I'm incredibly excited. Corina, please come on up and let's show people what we've got.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, everyone. I'm Corina Feuerstein. I'm a product lead in Microsoft Security. And I'm going to walk us through a real example here and show how we actually do this stuff in reality. So just starting with setting the ground for what we're going to look at. We're looking at an attack that involves AWS. It begins with an enter-ID compromise. Attacker then federates into AWS, assumes privileged roles, creates persistent access, and then disables some logging, executes data exfiltration and lateral movement in a couple different ways. That's what would happen if you do not have Defender in place to stop this. Notice the timeline from the time the attack starts until the SOC actually would get through all of this, investigate it, and take action, about 2 hours. By that time, it's already pretty late. So now Defender's graph-based detection is able to correlate these cross-cloud activities and actually trigger disruption at multiple points mid-chain here. And something important to note is that unified visibility here across Entra and AWS is key to be able to do that. So now let's step into the shoes of our SOC analyst. Start by opening the incident queue in Defender. First challenge every SOC analyst faces here, as Rob mentioned, lots of incidents and alerts, many with the same severity, different sources. Which should I attend first? Well, I'm excited to share with you our new AI-powered incident prioritization view, designed exactly to help analysts focus on what matters most. Eagle eyes will notice the new priority score column here. That's where Defender will tell you what to prioritize next based on a variety of risk factors. And here we indeed see our AWS attack at top. And Defender shows us what insights the AI used to prioritize this incident first. Things like involvement of critical assets, disruption kicking in, high risk related TI reports, notable MITRE techniques and alert types, and a lot of many different factors. So it's pretty clear why this is the top incident to investigate. Now let's head to the incident page. Here, we immediately observed that this attack reached the AWS environment and was automatically contained by attack disruption. So it's all good, it's contained, but we still want to understand what happened. Attack disruption is Defender's AI-powered built-in defense capability that autonomously identifies and stops evolving high-risk incidents like ransomware or business email compromise and attacks like this, preventing escalation basically and significant damage. So let's dive in. The important thing to note today is that attack disruption is now extended to AWS environments as well. So replaying this attack story, you can replay the stages. We can see it unfolding step by step. The first alert in this incident is about emails deleted after delivery. That means there's a detection of a phishing campaign that was in progress here. Next, we see a sign-in from the phished and now possibly compromised account and a network connection to a new IP address. So that raises the likelihood that the attacker has taken over this 𝗦𝗽𝗲𝗍𝗀𝗀𝗏 account. In the next stage, we see this attacker using this Enter-ID account credentials to federate into an AWS admin account, also marked as a critical asset. So at this point, this AWS signals received in Sentinel and correlated with Defender XDR signals result in high confidence confirmation of compromise. So now attack disruption can automatically kick in to contain it. And it revokes the session token, disables both the compromised Enter-ID account and the AWS admin role account used by the attacker. But wait, this is not the end of it, because the attacker was stopped in their tracks. They tried to pivot and exploit the backup account that they had created in AWS. Defender never rests. It immediately identifies the backdoor account activity and disables this account as well, cutting the attacker off completely and preventing any further lateral movement and damage. Great. So now, while attack disruption was taking place, security copilot agents were at work too. They're force multipliers to the SOC. Here we see the triage agent autonomously picked up a critical identity alert in this incident. This is new, and uses advanced AI tools and correlating behaviors, and concluded, just like an analyst would, but by itself, that this was a true identity compromise. The agent then classifies the alert and provides a detailed natural language explanation for its verdict, just like an analyst would. There's full transparency into this agent's activity. So it details every step it took in its analysis workflow and provides all the evidence used towards this verdict. Lastly, when we come back into the incident, we see a new reconnaissance alert showed up that wasn't there before. This is actually an AI-generated alert coming from our brand new dynamic threat detection agent. This security copilot agent investigates incidents, revealing more related attacker activity. It uses advanced AI to implicate and correlate related signals, enriching the incident with more alerts, assets, and indicators, making the attack story richer and helping analysts to respond faster and better to it. The agent provides a dynamically generated what happened description in natural language again, explaining the observed activity and why the alert was raised. So, to recap, what we just saw are examples of how the SOC is transforming with advanced AI. Defender's automatic attack disruption and Security Copilot AI agents worked in tandem here to identify, investigate, and stop this active and dangerous threat. Advanced automation leveraged AWS signal from Sentinel, took proactive action with high confidence to intervene, while AI agents enriched the incident with hidden insights and autonomously completed SOC tasks such as alert triage. We're now safe. Rob, back to you.
Thank you. I love that. Okay, I want to share just a few things before we actually get into a conversation with Allie about where we headed here. The first thing is we've highlighted a few of the agents that we have to share today, but there is an avalanche coming. And as we think about the toughest challenges across the SecOps team, there is limitless potential around how we can build new capabilities in every stage of that lifecycle to help protect organizations. And then the second time, I know you all heard this in the keynote. I know from the reaction there that you're all excited, but it bears repeating. Security Copilot now included for all E5 customers, because we want customers to be able to take advantage of these capabilities and really transform how your security teams work. So I'm thrilled to be able to repeat and share that news. Yeah. I agree. Let's protect some people. Okay, with that, I want to invite up Allie so we can have a conversation about the state of agentic AI. Allie, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
All right. We have our note cards because I wanted to imitate Stephen Colbert. That's my goal here.
I'm so excited to get interviewed by Stephen Colbert.
Yeah. It'll be a lot like that. So here, I think you might want this. So as we get started, what we want to talk about is why does this matter right now? Where are we going? And customers are asking a lot, how do we begin? I'd love for you to introduce yourself, and then I'd love for you to kick off and share a little bit about your perspective. In fact, you joined me last year at Ignite, and I could say threw a little shade, but offered a balanced perspective on how is AI really going to be useful for us? I'd love to hear an update on that.
Yes, I'm very excited. So it's very nice to see you all. I'm Allie Mellen. I'm a principal analyst at Forrester Research, and I cover security operations. So people, process, technology in the SOC, including EDR, XDR, SIEM, SOAR, security analytics. I also cover nation-state threats and AI and its use in security tools. So nothing that's very important right now at all. My background is in computer engineering. I was a computer engineer before becoming a hacker and then a security practitioner. So I've seen this industry from a lot of different sides, and I definitely have a deep appreciation for the tech, even though I am very skeptical of it. And that's a part of what we are talking about.
Appropriately skeptical.
Thank you. You're being so nice.
Oh, sorry. I'll dial it up. Don't worry.
That's what we're really going to talk about today, is that skepticism, because I have spent the last over 2 years being extremely skeptical of generative AI. And I actually think that we are at a really pivotal inflection point right now that is changing the way that we approach this in a really fundamental way. And that pivot point is ultimately AI agents and what AI agents are bringing to security, to every industry. Now, you can see the Forrester definition here: AI that performs a specific task autonomously or semi-autonomously. Agents interact with their environment, collect data, and make decisions based on predefined goals without constant human intervention. A little bit of a mouthful. At the end of the day, it is something that can do one specific task extremely well. That is the priority when we're looking at AI agents. We don't want to just be thinking about it in terms of like calling AI in a function, calling out to ChatGPT in a function. It is something that is specifically built to accomplish a specific task, whether that's triage or investigation or the like. And we find that it is very difficult to evaluate what good looks like with these agents. A lot of the demos look extremely flashy, but they don't often result in the things that people are expecting. And that is because we are ultimately pivoting from a very deterministic software world, 1 + 1 = 2, you get an input, you get an output, and you can constantly do that, to non-deterministic software, which is very much so reliant on coming up with a different answer potentially every time, depending on how radical you decide to make the LLM. Now, what that means is that there is one thing that is more important than anything else in this non-deterministic world, and that is trust. Now, we typically recommend you evaluate generative AI capabilities based on 3 areas: utility, trust, and cost. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about trust. I would have spent most of my time talking about cost, but they announced that E5 is going to include AI agents, so now I don't have to talk about that. But really, trust is where things get interesting, because you need to be able to trust the output of these AI agents. And that is extremely, extremely difficult to do with certainty. At the end of the day, what these AI agents are doing is they are replicating the processes that we as practitioners perform on a regular basis. So one of the ways that you can think about evaluating trust is, does the vendor even understand the processes that I take, right? Because unfortunately in security, we've seen that there are a lot of vendors that do not understand the processes that security practitioners take on a day-to-day basis. And so that should really be a prerequisite for you. The other aspect of this that's really important is, how does the vendor approach testing and validation of the output? One of the things that's really difficult about this transition to non-deterministic systems is that you can't just do a unit test and confirm that the output is going to be accurate every single time. You have to test the output every single time that you use a non-deterministic system if you're going to make sure it's right every single time. Otherwise, you end up crowdsourcing QA, which we see a lot with the thumbs up, thumbs down in the corner of the prompt response, right? And that's great. We definitely want to be able to give feedback, but it's not enough. And so there are a lot of different strategies that vendors use to address this, things like establishing guardrails or using a golden data set with a golden output so they can confirm, is the output what you want for this particular data set? Statistical sampling, where they look at a smaller portion of what's coming in and say, okay, it's right most of the time. Or even expert validation, where their team behind the scenes is doing a lot of the validation of the output. That's unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which vendor you are, the most effective way that we've seen this handled is by having a human in the loop every single time. Except it's not you as the customer, it is the vendor itself having the practitioners that they have in-house that, quite frankly, are more experienced, they can pay more, they can ensure that those practitioners are paid to literally do the right thing every single time. Now, there's another angle to this that gets really important once we develop enough trust in the system, and that is the fundamental shift to agentic systems. Agentic systems are where we get into systems of foundation models, rules, architectures, and tools which enable software to flexibly plan and adapt to resolve goals by taking action in their environment with increasing levels of autonomy. That is another big mouthful. Ultimately, what this means is, do you have a bunch of AI agents that can interact with one another? And can they do it autonomously? So you don't have to get in the middle of them and orchestrate those actions. You don't have to rely on traditional automation to make those agents interact. They're interacting by themselves. We typically talk about this. I like to use the juxtaposition of autonomy and action as two elements of this, where we saw like rule following automation could do typical actions, didn't have a lot of autonomy besides what it was directly told to do. But once you get into a solver agent where it has a more complex workflow, it's going to have more autonomy, it's going to have more action. Now, in Forrester's model, this goes a little bit beyond my research into what some of my other colleagues are doing. They see a world where we get to an executive agent which can take any input and achieve the right flow for that, which would basically be actual general artificial intelligence. I don't really care to get there, to be honest. I don't think we need to get there. We don't need these little humans or fake humans running around, right? I mean, Microsoft probably does want that.
There's a lot to do before we get there.
Yes, exactly. There's a lot to do. And what we ultimately want in security is we just want things that are going to be able to accomplish the tasks that we have to do effectively, right? And so really what we're looking for is a worker agent multi-flow system that has several agentic systems built into it that can do different things. So for example, you could have a triage agent that moves into an investigation agent for endpoint and for identity, and those two are working together to accomplish a specific goal and taking it all the way to response. That's where we get into this multi-flow scenario. Now, there's one more thing that I want to talk about since I'm monopolizing the stage.
Please.
Before we get into the Q&A part of this, which is how do you actually get there? Because this is a question that I get from clients a lot is, okay, I'm ready to start doing this, but how do you actually recommend approaching this? And we call this Forrester's 6 steps to the AI-enabled security organization. The first thing that you need to do is form an effective task force, which is cross-functional, to have a better understanding of, okay, what do we want to focus on with our initial deployment? And that's where you get into your minimum viable agent strategy. What are the tasks you want to accomplish? What are things that you can do that are going to have high impact and low risk, especially? The third step everyone hates, and I'm so sorry, because it's something we struggled with for a long time, but it is that you have to encode your runbooks. There are no groans.
Aww.
I know, everybody's pretending like they have their runbooks encoded. But in reality, I have not seen any team succeed using generative AI, especially AI agents, if they haven't encoded their runbooks, if they don't understand the steps that the agents need to take to come to a specific goal. It's also really important to develop guardrails and oversight for these systems. You don't want a random agent running around being able to take response actions, for example, that you can't trust. And then enforcing explainability is fundamental here. This should be a requirement for any vendor you work with, too, to be honest. You need to see the exact steps that the agent took to achieve the solution that it came to. This is good for multiple reasons, right? Of course, this is going to help you validate the output, but beyond that, it's also going to potentially help your team understand a new way to approach things. Because at the end of the day, AI isn't going to always follow the steps that your team would. And so it's kind of a learning opportunity as well, potentially, if it's coming with the right output. And then last but not least, of course, you got to track your success metrics and be able to communicate why this is valuable. This is one of the most annoying things that I've seen teams really struggle with, because they're getting a lot of questions internally from like internal audit being like, oh, are you replacing humans with this feature that you just bought? And at the end of the day, that is a almost impossible question to answer. But if you track the right metrics, think like especially mean time to investigate, because we see that that takes the longest in the incident response process, you can get a lot of value and show a lot of value with that. So now I'll pass it over to the fun portion of
All right.
this.
There's a lot to think about in there.
Yes.
I mean, metrics, obviously, in this space are a huge challenge.
I love metrics.
We have certainly spent a lot of time driving, refining, reworking how we do that. I do love the idea of the systems of agents working together. That's almost where it feels like we get the most sci-fi. But you brought up replacing humans. But since we've got a room full of security practitioners and change is hard, I'm curious, how do you think the analyst job is going to change going forward with this agentic world?
It's going to get a lot more specialized. That's the fundamental key, is that it is going to be a lot more focused, and it's going to, very excitingly, I think, transition from like, let's be real, what's ultimately a tool administrator role into a real profession. That's one of the things that I've had the most frustration with when we think about like analyst experience and how poor it is like, if you look at job descriptions, therefore, can you use KQL?
Yeah.
Do you know KQL well? How many years do you have with it? It's not about the fundamentals of security. We don't even have a real fundamentals of security in that way besides like no networking, no computing. This is giving us an opportunity to get to the point where we can. It's very similar to what's happening in software development, right? Everybody talks about, oh, nobody's going to need to code anymore. And that's not really true. Sure, they're not going to need to know like a specific programming language necessarily, but they're still going to need to know what an object is, what a function is, how to build an application. They just get to do a much more specialized and strategic thing, and that's what we're going to see in security as well.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're saying that they're going to have to up-level into thinking about like, well, what is the problem I'm trying to solve as opposed to the tools that I use to do it.
And what's going to be awesome is they're going to be able to, of course, do more from like a detection and response standpoint because they're going to be validating the output instead of just doing all of the work. But they're also going to be able to do things like threat hunting and threat intelligence research and actually exploring the things that we wish we had time for, but we do not.
Well, let's pull on that thread a little bit because I actually, I was talking about, we showed in the demo a lot of the like, oh, it'll triage your alert queue and won't that be great for the front line? But you're hinting at how it will impact across all the different roles in the SOC and hopefully help up-level them all. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so this is actually one of the things that I'm the most worried about because I don't think that there's a lot of good answers right now on how we approach the people within security operations and how this is going to affect them. Because to your point, it's going to make it so that they kind of switch their role a little bit into validation of what's coming out of these tools. But how do they get the experience? Like, if they don't have to struggle the way I struggled, how are they supposed to get there, right? But the reality is that we can address that and we can bring on new people and have them be effective at the roles that they're going to have if we do this right. But the challenge is that right now, we're not setting up the infrastructure to do this right. So what that means is, what we really need to do is think much more about talent management and how we are bringing people up to speed from net zero into what would be a mid-level or experienced role. Because those are the people that are going to get squeezed out and also going to be way more expensive and get gobbled up by the vendors. So when I think about like what the future looks like within security operations, there has to be a really well-built and robust talent management portion of this. And I think that the future of that still leans heavily into detection engineering, which I'm a big fan of and talk about a lot. Like, what we need to do is we need to break down the L1, L2, L3 system so that you just have detection engineers and all of them take alerts from start to finish. AI is going to enable you to do that better, but you need the mentorship of the more advanced people in order to get to the point where these newbies can actually do that. That's very fundamental to detection engineering. It was before generative AI, it will be after it. And if we take more of that kind of approach, then we can up-level people who have much less experience in the industry and get them prepared to take the actions they need to take.
Oh, that's exciting. I mean, as you talk about detection engineering, like just thinking about the intersection of what we see happening in all the coding tools with what we're talking about here inside of security, transforming what people do. But there's still, I love where you talked about we're going to have to be more thoughtful on how we develop skills and how we get people exposure to real-world security scenarios so they can ask those hard questions and guide the investigation and the hunt. What are the sort of concrete skills that you would recommend people get started with on that journey? How should we think about that?
So, specific to AI or just within security operations in general?
Let's do security operations first, and then maybe we'll span it out.
So especially if you're new, you need to be like actually understanding and evaluating incidents from the start.
Yeah.
Like you need to be taking them from 0 to 100
end to
so that
end.
you can really understand. And a lot of that initially is going to be about looking over people's shoulders and seeing what they're doing. Now, if you're net new to the field, every single person should be reading threat research and should be understanding what's happening with threat research because that is going to give you such a leg up when you're evaluating what's happening. The other factor here that's really important, which is talked a lot about that I do think should be a priority, is getting the business context and understanding the business context for the specific organization, because that's where AI it can help a little bit with things like RAG, but it can't fully address and can't fully take into account all of the things within the organization that are specific to that organization.
Right, which is a lot of complexity
Yeah.
and a lot of ambiguity. I'm thinking through like, how do we get people started in managing all of that? It almost feels like you want co-hunting where they sit next to the experienced practitioner and
it
see the
has to
world
be
from their point of view.
mentorship driven for
Yep.
sure. Like it is a lot about how do you get the people who have the experience to show the newer people what they need to do and how.
Yeah, I love that.
Notice I didn't say the word certification at all.
But we all love certification. I want to take more exams. That'll be great. Okay, let's come back to, I love these deterministic and stochastic and autonomous and agentic. It's like I'm back in a philosophy of AI class. This is so much fun. Let's try to unpack this a little bit. Where do we want to think about when to use which, and how should we think about the systems working together?
Yeah, so right now we have entirely over-indexed on AI. Everything is being made with AI, and well, I don't know if everything's being made with AI, but it's being said that it's being made with AI. And so we do need, I'm not looking at you.
Are you accusing the vendors of overhype?
But I do think that we need to reset and figure out where the balance is between what actually has to be non-deterministic and what doesn't. And there's something that is very important for practitioners in here too, which is you need to know whether something is non-deterministic or if it's deterministic when it comes to the software that you're using. If you do not know, if the vendor does not surface that for you, then you're not going to be able to adjust your processes internally to be able to make better decisions. And so one of the things that I'm really pushing is every single thing that uses generative AI needs to be very explicitly labeled that is using generative AI. Ideally with like some type of confidence score if that's possible so that we can understand like how confident are they in this output. But we need to be able to come into that scenario and say, I can't inherently trust this. I need to see, is this something that is actually true? I need to look at the explainability elements of it to figure that out. And so I would say, ideally, especially given a lot of what we've seen in the financial markets recently, everything that is possibly capable of being implemented with deterministic software should be implemented with that and save the rest for the non-deterministic stuff. Because at the end of the day, like, how many trees do we want to kill here?
Well, yeah. In addition to the environmental impact, like it has real cost. Like,
what do you mean real cost? In addition.
Sorry. Fair enough. I was just going for the one more time to remind people that Security Copilot is now an E5, which means that every time we run these systems, there's an expense to that. And so, of course, as a vendor, I'm looking for the most cost-effective way of getting things done if it is accurate.
And trusted. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That has to be the priority. And so, like, if you don't need a creative output to something, if you don't need something that is going to take a very, like, unstructured approach and follow a series of processes that a human would follow, just use deterministic software.
So what, do you have top things that you would be excited for vendors to go after?
I am the most excited about AI agents. I was very skeptical of AI agents, especially for investigation, for a long time. But then I actually met with a couple of enterprises that have been building this in-house. So they're not using vendor capabilities. They are using directly an LLM. They're using ChatGPT, and they've customized it such that it can do investigation for them, and their engineering team internally within the SOC is responsible for iterating and making sure that there are improvements happening. Now, there's a lot of benefits to this because you're able to really make sure that it's following your processes instead of just general what the vendor thinks are the best processes for this thing. But it takes a lot of engineering work behind the scenes. But the really cool part is they've actually been able to do this, and it's actually helped them to automate investigation. That was what sealed it for me, was seeing that. Now, I think that and translating that to the products that we use every day, and then also getting the accuracy and the trust up is going to be what fundamentally changes security operations, and that is all I'm thinking about right now.
Yeah, but it's great to hear you say that you do see the reality coming true. I just want to not quite quote you, get back to skeptical, and not quite quote you back to yourself, but at the Forrester Summit earlier this month, you actually talked about this problem where the agents are working, they are effective, but when you deploy them in a particular organization, they aren't seeing the results that they actually need. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely. That's actually directly related to what I saw with some of these enterprises that I've talked to, is that they were able to get that really great focus and really great process adherence because they had so much control over what AI was doing and the prompts that they were using and all of that. Unfortunately, as users with products, we're not necessarily going to get that, right? The vendor is going to set the constraints by which AI agents especially are taking action. We can likely provide some feedback, but it's going to be fairly limited. Now, the ways that I've seen this augmented are through RAG and through providing like any of your incident response playbooks and things like that into the system through RAG. But of course, again, coming back to the Forrester 6 steps, that requires that you have your runbooks encoded. And so...
Sorry, what are we supposed to do with the runbooks again?
This is such an important part of this.
Got it. Got it. All right. But it also feels like you think the vendors should be providing more tooling to make it easier to fine-tune them in the environment.
Yes, to a certain extent. I think that there's a level that goes too far. Do we need to have users affecting temperature? I don't think so, right?
Yeah.
That might be a little bit too far. But certainly, through RAG, through other means, if we can provide customization in that, that's great. I think that's a longer term thing. And to be honest, I'd really prefer the vendors to just get as close to right at first as they can. And that comes back to what I was talking about understanding the processes that users take and having the data to back up the processes that users take. Because I don't want to end up in a situation like we had with SOAR, where it's great because you can do a lot of customization, but that kind of, it acts like a crutch for a lot of vendors where they're like, oh, the users will customize it. We just gave them all the tools to do that. I don't want to end up back in that world.
Yeah, and then it's just as much work as if they just went and did the toil.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. In my talk, I threw out this line, AI should change the game because the defender should have more data. Agree? Disagree? What do you think?
So data is like the most annoying thing in security operations consistently, for cost reasons, for management reasons. It's just awful. And so on the one hand, yes, I have a lot of hopes that AI will enable us to interact with data better, especially like if we look at what's happening with MCP. There's a lot of potential for it to kind of provide a new standard by which we can interact with other tools and with other data effectively. Now, I'm also very skeptical that just introducing yet another standard will result in a world where we can finally access data effectively. So in lieu of that, I do think that like one of my biggest priorities next year is exploring and providing research more on the processes and the way that you approach security data management strategies. So what data do you really need in the SIEM? What data do you need for long-term storage? What data should you be just keeping at the source and doing detection there? And how do you separate out the data there? I think at the very least, in the short to medium term, that has to take place anyway. Maybe in the long term, we make a bet that AI is going to make that less important.
It'll figure it out itself.
It'll figure it out magically.
Well, we've thrown a lot of problems at AI, so it feels like we should give it some help. Excellent. The other thing I'm curious about is not just how do we make sure we have all the data in the organization, but how do we make sure we have the data around the security team and how they're working? Is there a conversation on processes? I feel like this gets back to metrics.
Yeah, I love metrics. Well, I mean, to me, in the context of AI and the data that you're providing to it, it comes back to like, what is the explainability that you're giving? What is the context that you're giving? What is the threat intelligence that you're giving? Like, all of this remains incredibly important with agents and should be provided with agents is the key. And so it does require you to be able to access that data and have it in a format that's easily accessible and also cost effective.
Love it. Excellent. Okay, one last thing. Finish this sentence.
Okay.
In 2026, great SOCs will...
In 2026, great SOCs will be prioritizing their talent management strategy such that they can get people prepared for what is going to happen with AI.
Thinking about the change. I love that. Allie, thank you so much for the time. Great conversation. Everyone,
thanks, everybody.
Thank you for joining us.